Hello everyone. Welcome to SRIRAM'S IAS presents Daily News Analysis. Welcome to the yet another session where we break down important articles appearing in the Hindu newspaper and we simplify them from the UPSC exam perspective. With this, let's dive into today's important articles. The important articles which appear in today's newspaper are these three. Let's take up the first article for the day. The first article which appears in the first page of the newspaper reads New Opportunities for E-Waste Recyclers. Now this article helps us to be an anchor to dive into the issue of e-waste or electronic waste. What do we mean by electronic waste? What are the issues surrounded around it? What are the provisions of law which have been enacted to tackle this issue of electronic waste? All of this we'll deal with through the help of this article. Then we'll also discuss what this article is saying, what are the new opportunities for the recyclers that this article is talking about. We'll deal with this one by one. But first, let's ask the important question, what do we mean by e-waste? What is meant by electronic waste, right? So let's discuss this via an example of a journey of an appliance, right? We are surrounded by all kinds of electronic appliances around us. We have a mobile phone, we have a laptop, we have a camera, right? We have all kinds of appliances in our home. Now, what happens to these appliances once they are out of use? Once they lose their utility, they become defunct, and then we look for a place to throw them. Can we throw them in a normal dustbin where they get piled up with normal biodegradable waste? What will happen to them? These appliances are made up of different metals and different elements than other waste. So therefore, these appliances have a lot of precious metals using which they were built, and that is why these appliances provide a big opportunity, to be segregated differently and to be recycled as well, so that these metals can be extracted back from these appliances and can be used again for manufacturing other different appliances. So this is the journey which our appliances have to go through, and e-waste becomes that kind of waste when these electronic appliances become defunct, and then they are known as e-waste. So the point about e-waste which we have to understand is that when these appliances become defunct, how to manage this waste, effectively so that they stay differently segregated from the normal waste, and how to extract these metals from these appliances effectively to make use of them again, right? So based on this, the government of India, looking at the issue of electronic waste, promulgated the electronic waste rules and amendment to it in 2016 and amendment to it in 2018. We look into the provisions of this particular rules, what they say. Before that, let's look at a previous year question paper which appeared in the UPSC exam, prelims exam. Now this question appeared in the 2013 preliminary examination. It talks about, due to improper or indiscriminate disposal of old and used computers or their parts, which of the following are released into the environment as e-waste? So we can see that UPSC also wants to focus on e-waste, and it wants us to particularly understand what kind of elements or chemicals are secreted when these e-waste are broken down. So we have 7 chemicals or pollutants coming out from these e-waste: beryllium, cadmium, chromium, heptachlor, mercury, lead, plutonium. Now, how to solve this question? We always talk about solving prelims question using intelligent guessing techniques. It might so happen that we are aware of e-waste, but it might not so happen that we are exactly aware as to what exact chemicals are coming out from the used computers. But using logic, is there any way to solve this question? If we look at this question carefully, we have one chemical known as plutonium. Do we know something about plutonium? Is it a radioactive element? Right? It's a radioactive element. Does computer can have a radioactive element in it? So using this logic, we can single out plutonium, that this might not be the chemical coming out from the used computers, and we see that option number 7 is there in all three options other than option B. So using the technique of elimination, we can choose option B, which is the correct answer for this question. So the point for us to see this question was to highlight the importance of e-waste and the aspect of the e-waste which UPSC wants us to focus on. Now with this, let's go on to discuss important provisions about e-waste. As we saw, e-waste is the waste consisting of discarded electronic products. We saw the journey of this product, such as computers, televisions and cell phone. What are some of the important data with respect to e-waste? India is a massive generator of e-waste. Obviously, if we use so many electrical appliances, we will be generating that much amount of e-waste as well. So therefore, India generates more than 2 million tons of e-waste annually, and the bulk of it is processed in the informal sector. What do we mean when we say the bulk of it is processed in the informal sector? When we talk about informal sector, here comes the rack pickers or manual waste pickers who segregate this waste, who collect this waste, segregate this waste and then process this waste. So the majority work, 90% of the collection and segregation was done and processed by these informal workers or the rack pickers. So that is the state of electronic waste sector. And India ranks 5th in the world in generating e-waste according to the UN's Global E-Waste Monitor 2014, right? So we can see via this data that India is a heavy generator of e-waste, and that is why we need a robust system to tackle this waste very effectively. E-waste contains several precious metals, rare earth metals, ferrous and non-ferrous metals, plastic, wood and glass. So therefore, due to the presence of this metal, these important metals as well as other chemicals and substances, it makes these waste materials very useful to recycle and then make use of them again. Also, these chemicals and these elements also make them harmful for normal people without any protective gear and protective equipment to extract these and segregate these. That is why unscientific practices in the processing of e-waste are associated with several environmental and health externalities. Now we can see that if the 90% of the e-waste segregators and processors are the informal workers or rack pickers, it makes their health quite in jeopardy, where they can have severe health effects due to processing of this e-waste. That is why, to manage this issue, Government of India brought about a law to manage e-waste, which is known as the Electronic Waste Management Rules 2016. Now, this set of rules became quite a game changer in managing e-waste in this sector. Let's look at the important provisions of the e-waste rules, which also become very important from the UPSC examination point of view for us. What are the important provisions? First of all, the ministry which deals with the application of these rules is the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which we also shortly call MOEFCC, notified the e-waste rules in supersession of the e-waste management and handling rules of 2011. So earlier the version of law which dealt with e-waste was of 2011, and then 2016 rules superseded the old set of rules. The new set of rules made the norms more stringent, and the new e-waste rules included compact fluorescent lamp, or which we also call CFL lamps. These were the older set of lamps which we used to use in our homes, which used to contain mercury as well as other such equipments. For the first time, now this is the first important provisions of the Act, that these rules brought the producers under the extended producer responsibility along with targets. What do we mean by extended producer responsibility? It was thought that there are manufacturers and producers of electronic appliances, right? There are various brands which manufacture these products, but after they have manufactured the products and sold them in the market to the consumer, does their responsibility get over with that product? That's the intervention which the rules try to make, that the responsibility of the producer or the manufacturer of that electronic appliance or the product does not end with only manufacturing and selling it to the consumer. It is also that producer's responsibility to retrieve that electronic waste from the market and see to it that this waste is also dealt with properly. This particular principle was called as extended producer responsibility, where the producer's responsibility with respect to the electronic appliance or the e-waste was extended to the level of handling its waste as well. This was, producers have been made responsible for the collection of e-waste and for its exchange. This particular principle of the law has been quite effective, and this is what we'll also discuss in today's article, what they're trying to say. At the heart of it is the understanding of extended producer responsibility, wherein the producer of the electronic appliance is also made responsible to collect the appliance back and to manage the waste which it in the first place sold to the consumer. For the purpose of better handling of this, various producers can have a separate producer responsibility organization or PROs. Now what are PROs? Various of such producers can club together and form a body which can be called as producer responsibility organization. This collective body will carry out the function of collecting the waste, segregating the waste and taking it to its proper use effectively together. That is the purpose of producer responsibility organization, and ensure collection of e-waste as well as its disposable in a environmentally sound manner. That would be the function of the producer responsibility organization. Then the third important provision of the rules is the deposit refund scheme. Now what does the deposit refund scheme say? It says that whenever a producer is selling an electronic appliance, along with it, it also takes a certain deposit from the consumer. Now what is this deposit for? Whenever the consumer is done with the usage of the appliance, if it comes to the producer or whatever shop he or she bought that appliance from and returns that appliance, the defunct appliance, he or she will get that deposit back, so that this makes a mechanism where the consumer also has a responsibility to return the appliance. Now the deposit which he paid at the time of buying the appliance, he will get that deposit back along with interest. So it was introduced as an additional economic instrument, wherein the producer charges an additional amount as a deposit at the time of the sale of the electrical and electronic equipment and returns it to the consumer along with interest when the end of life electrical and electronic equipment is returned, right? I hope the deposit refund scheme is clear. It's simply a deposit taken at the time of selling the product, so that when the usage of the product is done, the consumer can return the defunct product and take back the deposit along with interest. This ensures the circular economy of the product, and it ensures that the product of the waste is handled better. The next important provision is also where the role of state governments have been enhanced to ensure safety, health and skill development of the workers involved in dismantling and recycling operations. Now as we saw earlier, the workers who will be working in this industry are posed by several health risks, and the protection of their health has been entrusted to the state governments, where they need to make sure the protective equipment is granted to the workers working in the industry, and a provision of penalty for violation of rules has also been introduced in these particular rules, right? So if all of these responsibilities, all of this extended producer responsibility as well as the other provisions are not adhered to by any company, they would be penalty charged for them. And the urban local bodies or the municipal committee or council or corporation, as we have according to the various cities and towns, has been assigned the duty to collect and channelize the orphan products to authorized dismantler or recycler. right? So urban local bodies have also been given the responsibility to handle those products which did not find a suitable consumer, or they were disposed of irresponsibility, and they were just found, or which can also be called orphan products. So those products would be dealt by urban local bodies, who would then supply it to some authorized dismantler or recycler. Now these rules were amended in 2018. What amendments were made in 2018 to these rules? The e-waste collection targets under EPR have been revised and is being applied from October 2017. Now, under the amendments of e-waste rules, certain targets were given to the electronic equipment manufacturers. Now, these targets mean that when the rules were applied, enacted first time in 2016, it is obvious that it cannot be concluded or assumed that the equipment manufacturers would be able to collect back all the waste at once. That is why the rules started to employ responsibility upon them very gradually. So at first, 10% of your sales, whatever equipment sales the manufacturer or seller is making, 10% of that sales should be recollected back. And then every year this target would increase. So the phase-wise collection targets for e-waste in weight is 10% of the quantity of waste generation. So the 10% of the waste generation first is to be achieved by the seller with a 10% increase every year until 2023. The target from 2023 onwards shall be 70% of the quantity of waste generation as indicated in the EPR plan. So after 2023, 70% of the total equipment that is being sold should be recollected back as the e-waste, and the quantity of e-waste collected by the producers from October 1, 2016 to September 30, 2017 shall be accounted for in the revised EPR targets until March 2018. This was the provision which was laid at the time of the enactment of the amendment rules. And separate e-waste collection targets have been drafted for new producers. That is, those producers whose number of years of sales operation is less than the average lives of their products. So those who are new in the market, those who are new sellers, they will have different responsibilities. So goes to say that they will have larger responsibilities because their operations are freshly being set up. They should not have much problem to also set up facilities for collecting the waste. So they would have larger targets. And the producer responsibility organizations which we talked about, PROs, shall apply to the Central Pollution Control Board. This is the nodal body which takes care of the rules for registration to undertake activities prescribed in the rules. So that which is the body which takes care of handling of the amendment rules for e-waste, it is the Central Pollution Control Board, right? So these were the important provisions which came about in the amendment rules for e-waste. Now, last month there has been a draft notification for the electronic waste. What is this draft notification for electronic waste? The last month has been some more provisions have been added to the management of electronic waste. What are these additions done? More electronic goods are covered. A wide range of electronic goods including laptops, landline and mobile phones, cameras, recorders, music systems, microwaves, refrigerators and medical equipment have been specified in the notification. So as we can see, as the provisions are getting updated, they are getting more wide, more specified and more detailed, and the targets have also been revised. The consumer goods companies and makers of electronics have to ensure at least 60% of their electronic waste is collected and recycled by 2023. So we now see that the target has been enhanced and then to increase to 70% and 80% in 2024 and 2025 respectively. This is the revised target under the draft notification. When we say draft notification, this is the law proposed by the government, which has now come out in the open. Now it is there. It has a validity period for 60 days for public consultation, which means that after the government has promulgated certain rules, it gives 60 days to all the stakeholders to register either their affirmation or dissent in any manner, and then if all discussions are made, then this law would be notified. So at this stage, it is at the draft stage, and the companies will have to register on an online portal and specify their annual production and e-waste collection targets. So provisions are also made to gather the data on companies and their collection targets. And now an important concept has been introduced in this draft known as Epr certificates. Now what are the Epr certificates? The mention of it is in today's article. Epr certificates mean that, let's say, there is either a seller company of the electronic equipment or there is a professional recycler company wherein the company is indulged specifically into the work of recycling all kinds of electronic waste. Whatever waste it generates, and rather than generating, whatever waste it is collecting, where how much ever waste it collects, it can apply to Central Pollution Control Board with the list of its collection and take a certificate from them. This certificate will act as a recognition for them as to the amount of electronic waste that they have collected and processed. So these rules bring into effect a system of trading in these certificates. Now this certificate which they get, it can also be traded, just like the system of carbon credits. So now whatever target, let's say a recycler has achieved the target and he or she has got that certificate, they can also trade this certificate with other companies, right? That this will allow the companies to temporarily bridge the shortfalls, and the rules lay out a system of companies securing extended producer responsibility certificates. So the rules also give out the procedure as to, like I explained right now, that is the procedure for securing the certificates. Now with this backdrop of the provisions of law surrounding e-waste, what is the article featuring in the newspaper saying? The article featuring in the newspaper is highlighting a success story due to these new set of rules, where at first when we talked about that the majority work is being done by the informal sector due to the advent of the principle of extended producer responsibility, it has given a fresh impetus and a fresh chance to the manufacturers as well as the professional recyclers or recycling companies. Now the recycling companies have also been able to venture into the market, and the news says that Delhi headquartered Epr Recycling, one of India's largest electronic waste management companies, is going to invest $1 billion in expanding their business. So it shows the success of the rules using which now these recycling companies are able to expand their operations, and using the Epr certificates, the concept of which we talked about, these certificates will help them collect the e-waste and make an account for them, and also trade these certificates with other companies as well. This was what the article was talking about, right? So this was our discussion on the concept of e-waste. What are the provisions of law surrounding them which become important for us from the examination point of view? What are the challenges that exist in the center, in this sector, and to what extent are these being dealt right now, right? So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, fresh impetus to Jal Jeevan mission in Rajasthan with new committees. Now this particular article, which part of the syllabus will this fall into? When we talk about Jal Jeevan mission, it talks about water conservation. So water conservation, or the issue of making policy on water conservation, falls into GS2 part, which under the head government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. So wherever for the development in various sectors government policies are made, Jal Jeevan Mission becomes a government policy. It falls under the GS2 part. This is the scheme aspect of it. Now the article talks about a fresh impetus given to Jal Jeevan Mission. So on that context, we will talk about the important scheme of Jal Jeevan Mission. What does Jal Jeevan Mission intend to do? What are the provisions under the scheme? And what is now the article talking about? Right? Let's first take a look at the Jal Jeevan Mission. What is the Jal Jeevan Mission basically? Launched in 2019, the mission or the objective of Jal Jeevan Mission is to supply of 55 liters of water per person per day to every rural household through functional household tap connections by 2024. So it's an ambitious target to supply 55 liters of water per person per day to every rural household. This is the objective of the Jal Jeevan Mission. And how does it intend to fulfill this objective? It looks to create a Jan Andolan, or what we can also call community partnership. Making it everyone's priority. Now this is the highlight point for this mission, where when we talk about handling our natural resources, only the work of government is not envisaged in this scheme. Apart from it, it also intends to involve the participation of the community to implement these schemes. Therefore, we look at what are the provisions made as to how the community can participate in this scheme, and then it comes under the Jal Shakti Ministry. So which is the ministry which takes care of handling of the Jal Jeevan Mission? It's the Jal Shakti Ministry, which is the new name given to the Water Resource Ministry. Under the aims of Jal Jeevan Mission, it ensures functionality of existing water supply systems and water connections. So how would it ensure that 55 liters of water per person is received per day to every rural household? It would be done by efficient and better management of the existing water system. So under the mission, these water supply systems and connections need to be better managed, and also water collecting monitoring, water quality monitoring and testing, as well as sustainable agriculture. So all those practices which would be required to conserve water, to make better efficient use of it, would be covered under Jal Jeevan Mission. It also ensures conjunctive use of conserved water, drinking water source augmentation, drinking water supply system, grey water treatment and its reuse. What do we mean by grey water? Water containing impurities can be called as grey water. So like I said, all those activities which are important for augmenting or conserving water, making efficient use of it, would be covered under the Jal Jeevan Mission. Now what are the features of Jal Jeevan Mission? The Jal Jeevan Mission focuses on integrated demand and supply side management of water at the local level. Now when we say integrated demand and supply side management, it means that the demand for water and the supply for water, all of the plans for both ends of the need should be made and in an integrated manner. That is when the demands would be known to the supply side, and in that manner both demand and supply can complement each other, and this would be done at a local level. That is where the scope of community participation can come in, and creation of local infrastructure for source sustainability measures such as mandatory elements like rainwater harvesting, groundwater recharge and management of household wastewater for reuse. Now to do all of this, community participation would become very effective and important as well for water harvesting, to manage groundwater recharge, management of the household wastewater. That is why at the heart of this scheme is the concept of community participation. and is undertaken in convergence with other government programs and schemes. Like we discussed, the mission is based on a community approach to water and includes extensive information, education and communication as a key component of the mission. So this there would be committees under this mission who would undertake to create awareness about the issues of water, educate with respect to all of these techniques of harvesting, groundwater recharging, management of the wastewater and communicating various techniques. This would be covered under this mission. Now, how would be the community participation implemented under the scheme in order to manage the implementation of the scheme? So there would be something known as the Pani Samitis. These Pani Samitis would be consisting of 10 to 15 members, of which the people from which would be of the same village, with at least 50% women members and other members from self-help groups, Asha workers and Anganwadi teachers. These would make up the Pani Samiti, which would plan, implement, manage, operate and maintain the village water supply system. Here comes the practical aspect of community participation. And the plans made by this Pani Samiti would be, these committees prepare a one-time village action plan, merging all available village resources and then approved in a Gram Sabha before implementation. This is the system made under Jal Jeevan mission. Now, how is the funding pattern for this mission? The fund sharing pattern between the center and states is 90:10, which means that for some states, that is for Himalayan and northeastern states, 90% funding will come from the center and 10% from these states, whereas 50:50 for other states, excluding the Himalayan and northeastern states, and 100% for the union territories, where 100% would be supplied by the center. So this is the funding pattern. Now, what is the progress made so far? It is generally seen that this mission is on a progressive path. So when the mission was launched, only 17%, that is 32.3 million of the country's rural households had a tap water supply. Today, around 7.80 crore, that is around 41.14% of the households envisaged under the Jal Jeevan mission have tap water supply. So this, according to the government, this scheme has been a success story. And to complement the Jal Jeevan mission, the Jal Jeevan mission rural, Jal Jeevan mission urban was announced in the budget 21-22. These were some of the points which were important from the point of view of understanding the Jal Jeevan mission as a scheme. Now, what does the article say? The article says about the creation of fresh committees. The committees which we talked about in the scheme right now, the Rajasthan is, fresh committees are created, which is known as the Water and Sanitation Committee, right? So, one can say the establishment of this committee is the heart of the news in Rajasthan. These committees would ensure public participation. As we saw, the works that are supposed to be done by this community entails public participation, and these would be set up at all three levels: state, district and village levels. So that is the news wherein these committees are being set up, and in Rajasthan, total 43,250 such committees are in work, which undertake the implementation, the planning, monitoring and implementation part of the Jal Jeevan mission. And it is Rajasthan government's plea to the center that the funding system which we saw is 50-50 for center and state. Rajasthan government wants us to make 90:10, just like for the Himalayan and northeastern states. These are some of the important points pertaining to the Jal Jeevan mission. With this, let's move on to the next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper is about economically sensitive zone, or what we call ESZ. Keep the ESZ of 1 kilometer around forests is being said by the Supreme Court. Now, the concept of economically sensitive zones comes under the conservation of forests, and that is why it becomes a part for us to study under GS3 syllabus of environment. where we talk about conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, and also environmental impact assessment. Under this head, we study the conservation of environment, and whenever we make laws for the better management of forest resources of the country, we study it under the environment portion. Now, what do we mean by eco-sensitive zones? What are eco-sensitive zones, right? This is something which has been earlier asked in the examination. Let's look at a previous year question paper to this regard. This question appeared in the 2014 edition of the prelims examination. What does the question read? With reference to the eco-sensitive zones, which of the following statements is or are correct? Eco-sensitive zones are the areas that are declared under the Wildlife Protection Act. The second statement says the purpose of the declaration of eco-sensitive zones is to prohibit all kinds of human activities in those zones except agriculture, right? So this is the question which was asked. Let's try to understand about eco-sensitive zone, and then we'll try to answer this question whether or not with the given information can we answer this question. Now, what are eco-sensitive zones? We know that for the conservation of forests around the country, we have various kinds of instruments set up to protect these forests. What are these instruments? We designate them by the term of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, biosphere reserves. All of these instruments are created to do what? To protect the forest resources, right? Now, where does eco-sensitive zone feature then? Eco-sensitive zones are basically, one can say, that an additional boundary around these national parks or wildlife sanctuaries. It's an additional boundary created to act as a buffer zone or a transition zone between the normal land and the protected areas. That is the short concept of eco-sensitive zones. So, eco-sensitive zones, or what are also called as ecologically fragile areas, are areas within 10 kilometers around protected areas, national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. So, if this is the protected area, if this is the area covered under the protected area, this would be an area of width 10 kilometer around the protected area would be the ecologically eco-sensitive area. This is the concept of eco-sensitive zone. Ecologically sensitive zone, and they are notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Government of India under Environment Protection Act, right? So the question said Wildlife Protection Act, whereas it is actually notified under the Environment Protection Act. In case of places with sensitive corridors, connectivity and ecologically important patches crucial for landscape linkage, even area beyond 10 kilometer width can also be included in the eco-sensitive zone. So, the limit of 10 kilometer is not a very rigid limit. If there is a protected area for which even area beyond 10 kilometer can be designated as an ecologically sensitive zone, so even that can be done. The basic aim is to regulate certain activities around national parks and wildlife sanctuaries so as to minimize the negative impacts of such activities on the fragile ecosystem encompassing the protected areas. What are these activities which make these protected areas vulnerable to degradation? These are construction activities, mining, deforestation programs, all such things which take place in and around the protected areas make these protected areas vulnerable. And the concept of introducing ecologically sensitive zones is to prohibit these kind of areas. So what are those activities which are prohibited in ecologically sensitive zones, or what are some of the activities which are permitted as well? Let's take a look at them, which are the activities allowed in the ecologically sensitive zone. So there are certain strictly prohibited activities which certainly cannot be undertaken in the ecologically sensitive zone. What are those activities? What these activities would be severely harming the ecosystem of the forest. So that would be commercial mining, sawmills, industries causing pollution, which has pollution such as air, water, soil and noise. So all such pollution causing industries, establishment of major hydroelectric projects, commercial use of wood, tourism activities like hot air balloons over the national park, discharge of effluents or any solid waste or production of hazardous substances. All of these activities which pose grave threat to the protected area would be prohibited in the ecologically sensitive zone. Then there is a section of certain activities which can be permitted but would be regulated. What are these activities? Felling of trees. If you have to cut the trees, it would be permitted but it would be regulated. Establishment of hotels and resorts. Commercial use of natural water. Erection of electrical cables. Drastic change of agriculture system. For example, adoption of heavy technology, pesticides, etc., or widening of roads. So all of these interventions are permitted but would be regulated or done with the permission and under the monitoring of the authorities. And what are those activities which are permitted in ecologically sensitive zone? Ongoing agricultural or horticulture practices, or rainwater harvesting, or organic farming, use of renewable energy sources, or adoption of green technology for all activities. These are some of the activities which are permitted in the ecologically sensitive zone. So based on this, can we answer the question where we saw this, that the ecologically sensitive areas are declared not under Wildlife Protection Act but under the Environment Protection Act. And the purpose of the declaration of ESZs is to prohibit all kinds of human activities except agriculture. This also becomes a wrong statement, because we also saw that there are certain permitted activities which are also regulated. So that is why the correct answer over here becomes option D. Now, what are the significance of this ecologically sensitive zones? This is what also the article is pointing out. Now, what is the article saying? The article through which Supreme Court is declaring to the government, where it is saying that around all kinds of national parks and protected areas, at least 1 kilometer area should be designated as ecologically sensitive zone. And they are promulgating that at least 1 kilometer area should be definitely established as a ecologically sensitive zone. And the significance which they point out is that it is to minimize the impact of urbanization and other developmental activities adjacent to protected areas. That is why these areas are declared as eco-sensitive zone. And the purpose of declaring eco-sensitive zone around these areas is for creating some kind of a shock absorber. This is the term which the Supreme Court is also using. And they also act as a transition zone from areas of high protection to areas involving lesser protection, right? So when we make an additional area from the normal land to the national park, they also act as a transition zone. And they also help in situ conservation, which deals with conservation of an endangered species in its natural habitat. For example, the conservation of the one-horned rhino of Kaziranga National Park. So Kaziranga National Park, around it also has a ecologically sensitive zone which helps in the conservation of the species. And such zones also minimize forest depletion and man-animal conflict, because more the area available for the species, the man-animal conflict due to the presence of such a transition zone can be avoided, right? So these were some of the important points associated with the ecologically sensitive zone which we need to keep in mind with respect to the exam perspective. With this, we come to end of today's session. We'll meet tomorrow. Don't forget to post your doubts in the comment section. We'll meet tomorrow with important articles of the day, right? Thank you.